Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our annual Jazz Night concert. We're extremely excited to present our middle school jazz band, high school jazz band, and then the Jazz Night Big Band, which will allow us to really showcase the jazz program in North Andover, and then also our guest artist who worked with us on Monday, working with our middle school band, our high school band, and then our Jazz Night Big Band, Christine Fossen, who has been great working with the students and kind of developing their jazz vocabulary and just some really great words of wisdom. And it's always great to have some wonderful jazz musicians come in and impart their knowledge on us. So we hope you enjoy our performance. We're going to start now with the middle school jazz band, and the first tune we're going to play is a blues called Blue Monk. All right, that was Samantha on the trumpet, Haley on the alto saxophone, Robbie on the tenor saxophone, Dawson on the trombone, and Christine Fawcett on the trumpet. Group one. We're going to continue now with a beautiful ballad that you'll probably recognize, made famous by Ray Charles. This is Georgia on My Mind. We're going to end the middle school portion of the performance with a really exciting Latin tune called St. Thomas. That is a really, really wonderful, famous tune by Sonny Rollins. Hope you enjoy it. the North Andover Middle School Jazz Band. That was Samantha on trumpet again, Dawson on trombone, and the fabulous Christine Foster on trumpet. Thank you so much. We'll just have a brief couple minutes to reset for the high school band, and we'll be right back with you. Thank you.
Good evening. This is the High School Jazz Ensemble, and we're going to kick things off with a Thad Jones and Mel Lewis tune called Groove Merchant. I'd like to slow things down a little bit and feature senior Henry Schutzenbeck on alto sax with a song called Pure Imagination from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Before we play our last tune, I'd just like to recognize our senior members. I'll start in the alto section. Henry Schutzenbeck, alto sax. Michael Fouché, Barry sax. Back in our rhythm section, Mikkel Reddy Glover on drum set. Trombone, Jason Gosselin on trombone. Back in our trumpet section, Sebastian Valentine on trumpet. And also Miss Vanessa Bailey on trumpet. So we'd like to close our portion of the program with a tune by the band Weather Report called Birdland. And as Mr. Nelson spoke, we had the pleasure of having Miss Christine Fawcett come out and work with us on Monday. And it was a real pleasure having her here, just talking about engagement and just kind of how, being a musician, it's just not about playing the notes, but you really have to have a passion for what you do. You have to put that passion through your instrument. And it was just so great to have someone come in and just give energy to the room and talk to the kids about her playing, how she has passion, and how she kind of gets motivated with her singing and hearing things in nature. And the students really kind of, once she started to talk about that, things really started to come to life. And it was just a great thing having her here to have another voice with them and kind of talking about music through kind of a different lens than they see with me. So again, thank you to Christine Fawcett for coming out and working with us. It was, again, an extreme pleasure, and the students really went away really motivated and learning some new things, which is the whole point of bringing our guest clinicians in to kind of just give us another viewpoint and talk about things that sometimes we don't always have in our skill set. So thank you to Christine for coming out. We're going to close with Birdland. Christy Fido, tenor sax. Xavier Cohen, tenor sax. Miss Christine Foster on the trumpet. Everybody up, everybody up. Where's our high school jazz ensemble? Thank you so much. We'll take a brief pause. We're going to reset for the next group, and we'll be right back with you. Thank you.
Continue now with the Jazz Night Big Band. This is a group of teachers and parents and people from the community. We get together on this night every year to put together a band to close the concert, to kind of show the students what we can do, and also give them a chance to feature our guest, Christine Foster, a little bit more, and selfishly for Mr. Innes, myself, and Mr. Smalley to get to play a little bit ourselves. So this is the Jazz Night Big Band, and we're going to start off with a blues called Potato Blues.
Hello, I'm Christine. It's great to meet you. It's been a great week this week, meeting some of the students and listening to the bands and just witnessing the fabulous program that you have here. And I think I'd like you to give yourselves a round of applause, parents, for bringing your students to the rehearsals and the concerts and for being here. Thank you, parents. We play music because we love it. And I think that's the best thing we can do in life is just focus on what we love and take it from there. So thank you for being here and for letting us share our love with you. The next song we have is called Beautiful Love. you can't say that for most community bands. It's really great to see these band directors and teachers playing music, because that's the culture. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to play. Well, I'm actually a singer. That's my first instrument. So we're going to do one of my favorite tunes. I sing American Songbook, so if you ever see me sing around town or anything, mostly I'm singing and then I play. This is a hard instrument to keep up, so I practice trumpet more than my singing, right? Like, God, you know, you gotta keep it on the face, you know? And so, but I love all the horn players, and I love scatting, and I love all that stuff. But this one, we're just gonna sing a nice melody by Irving Berlin. Some of you old timers know this. This is Blue Skies. Blue sky shining at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. Bluebirds singing a song, nothing but bluebirds all day long. I never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right, noticing the days hurrying by. When you're in love, my days fly. 2 days, all of them gone, nothing but blue skies from now on. Come on. I never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right, noticing the days hurrying by. When you're in love, my days fly. 2 days, all of them go, nothing but blue skies. Can you see the blue sky? Can you see the blue sky? From now on. Thank you. Now the trumpet section's gonna have some fun. I'll join them.
Before we play our final tune, I just a couple thank yous. First of all, a huge thank you to all the students who performed tonight. Excellent performances by the middle and high school band. How about a hand for them? And this night would never be possible without the huge efforts and the financial support from the North Andover Music Association. They make this whole thing possible. You know, many years ago, I came to them and said, I'd like to bring in guest artists, and then a couple of years later, I'm like, I'd like to have a whole big band, and they're like, all right, let's do it. And I'm like, thank you, this is wonderful. So this whole night came together because of them. So thank you to the North Andover Music Association, and thank you to everyone, all the parents here, thank you for all the support. This is one of my favorite nights of the year. And a huge thank you to Christine Fawcett for all her expertise and wonderful playing. The two of us, yeah. All right, so this is a fantastic Gordon Goodwin tune that features the trumpet section, who is in the back row. This is called Back Row Politics. Have a great night.